Bands make up service's smallest and simplest form of political organization. These groups are principally defined by several features. Small population size, ranging from 20 people to several hundred, but no larger. They make use of foraging as a subsistence method. Social organization is primarily based on kinship ties. Social power structures are flexible and based on consensus. These structures are highly egalitarian and are typically not dominated by any one person or group. Overall, the political structure of a band is primarily defined by its small size. As there are so few people in a band, there is no need for more intensive subsistence methods. Kinship by default has to be a primary organizer of people, as almost everyone in the band is going to be related to one another. And the population base is simply too small to support an entrenched political power structure, like full-time rulers. The flexible power structure of bands has been a great interest to anthropologists. It gives us the chance to ask if humans are egalitarian or hierarchical by nature. As we've seen, the majority of human beings have lived as foragers. This means a majority of human beings have lived in egalitarian social structures. But in today's world, with very few exceptions, virtually all humans live in cultures that include notable political hierarchies. In any political hierarchy, there are more people on the lower tiers than there are on the upper tiers. Take your typical monarchy. One king or queen oversees tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of subjects. There are always more people who could rise up and physically overthrow a power structure than there are people controlling that power structure. While occasionally revolutions are not uncommon, a majority of the world continues to live with hierarchical political structures. Even the modern United States, which prides itself on being an open democracy, has a notable political hierarchy. If you doubt this, ask yourself if you could make an appointment to meet the president. Then ask if the CEO of General Electric or of Bank of America could make an appointment to meet with the president. While a majority of human beings have lived in egalitarian societies, a majority of humans today are willing to live in hierarchical societies. We may never have an answer to what is natural for human beings, but it seems as if we are quite willing to accept both types of structures. The next step up on services typology is the tribe. Tribes are principally defined by relatively small populations of a few hundred people up to a few thousand at most. They are larger than a band, but still pretty small. Subsistence is based on simple forms of pastoralism and horticulture. With more mouths to feed, you need a more productive subsistence system. In some cases, when you have a particularly productive environment, tribes may still rely on foraging. Social organization is based on villages and kinship groups, including clans and lineages. At this point, we have more people than just a kinship group can encompass. Thus, people start to identify with their village or place of residence. Power structures are still relatively egalitarian and consensus-based. Some leaders may emerge, but power is limited and based on achieved status, person's personal achievements. Tribes can be a problematic term in anthropology due to its other meanings in more popular discourse. For example, news reporters often use the term in a pejorative sense, attempting to convey a sense of primitive or uncivilized people. When violence breaks out in remote parts of the world, reporters immediately jump on ideas of tribal factions or ancient tribal hatreds. This usage of the term tribe is very much at odds with the terms used in anthropology. Anthropologists are solely referring to the structure of political organization within the group. They are not making value-laden statements about the worth of the culture or its politics. If you make use of the term tribe in this class, make sure you are very careful about using it correctly. The most complex form of organization in services typology was identified as the chiefdom. Chiefdoms mark a significant change in human organization to a more complex form of organization. Chiefdoms are often regarded as a transitional form, eventually leading towards a state. Chiefdoms are principally defined by the following characteristics. Populations at this point become much larger, organizing thousands, if not tens of thousands of people. As a result, chiefdoms also typically organize multiple villages or population centers together. Subsistence method employed by chiefdoms must be more productive in order to provide for all of these people. We typically see the emergence of agriculture in these groups. Remember, we defined agriculture as the intensive production of domesticated plants by means of irrigation systems, terraces, raised fields, or other means. Agriculture produces a substantially larger food base and thus can feed the dense populations of a chiefdom. Populations in chiefdoms are organized around consolidated political power structure. They are organized around the chief and his or her seat of power. Thus we often find that the chief's home village is larger than any other village in the region. Other villages tend to be smaller, with a greater reliance on kinship organization. The political power structures found in chiefdoms represent a major shift towards heredity and hierarchical power. To be a chief of a chiefdom, you have to be born into the role. Typically, no one gets to work their way up to being a chief. The political power of a chiefdom, however, is not as stable as a state. We've already mentioned the possibility of revolutions within modern nation-states, but such revolutions of power are even more common in chiefdoms. One chiefdom will rise in power over a few decades, only to eventually collapse and be replaced by another growing chiefdom. Services typology has been both widely embraced and widely criticized by his fellow anthropologists. The most prominent criticism has been that services typology oversimplifies the reality. This is undoubtedly true. We are boiling down every single culture that has ever existed on the planet into just 4 types. At this point, you should have a new appreciation for just how diverse culture can be. Thus you can imagine that no single culture would ever perfectly fit into any one of services types. However, services typology is also widely employed by anthropologists. Those who deny they use services typology are generally working from data shaped by our understanding of this typology. The greater strength of services 4 types is the fact that it gives us a vocabulary to discuss cross-cultural differences. When scholars don't make use of a shared vocabulary system, chaos is generally the result. People talk past one another and retread ground already well studied by someone else. Imagine if every computer used its own unique programming language. They would never be able to efficiently talk to one another. Services typology can unwittingly encourage us to overlook nuances of differences between cultures, but it also allows us to talk about the differences between cultures.